This technique will get more of your photo in focus, and it's as simple as focusing here, here, and here. Then when you're back at home, it's a case of stacking and blending the photos together. I'll show you that a little bit later on, so make sure you stick around for that. Focus stacking is a great skill to learn for landscape photography as well as macro photography, and it's not that hard at all. Now, if you already know what to do in the field but want to know how to blend them together when editing, go to this time code. But if you don't, keep watching. All that focus stacking means is that you focus on the furthest point, the midpoint, and the closest point, then you stack them in the computer, so in the end result, everything is in focus. You can focus on more points than that, but today I'm going to keep it to 2 or 3 points just to keep things simple. So if you do have photographs where that foreground is a little bit blurry, but you don't want it to be, this is the technique you really need to learn. The first thing to take into account is there are times and places where you do need to focus stack, but there are other times where you really don't. All you need to do is have a look to see what's in your frame. If it's all a similar distance away from you and on the same plane, chances are you won't need to focus stack. Like for instance, in this location I'm at now, I'm on a nice viewpoint, and all the things that I want to photograph I'm going to shoot with a telephoto lens, and they're all pretty much going to be the same distance away from me. And the lens can cope with it really well. However, if I have things in my frame that are really close to the camera as well as really far away, this is when it's great to focus stack. I've got these rocks in the foreground, I've got the boathouse, and then I've got this small mountain in the distance. So they're the 3 things that I'm going to focus on. Here's a little tip. If you're not sure whether to focus stack or not, focus on the furthest thing in your shot. In this case, it's the mountain. So I'm going to focus on the mountain and take a photograph. So I've got that photograph now, and I'm going to look at this shot. So I'm going to zoom in, and then come right down to the foreground. And I can see those rocks are really blurry. Now this actually reminds me about aperture. If you're shooting wide open at f4, f5.6, or even wider, you do need to close your aperture down. And this means making that f number bigger. So basically the bigger the f number, the smaller the aperture. What this does is make the depth of focus deeper in your shot, so more is in focus from front to back. This will lessen the chance that you need to focus stack. f11 to f16 is normally a good aperture range for landscapes. So I'm going to change my aperture. I'll get it to, let's go f11. Again, I'm going to focus on the mountain and then take a shot. And then I'll look at it, come down into the foreground. So with this one, it's just getting a bit blurry on those rocks. So I do need to focus stack this. So with this shot, because we've got the water, I want to smooth that out. I've got the polarizer and I've got a 6-stop. I'm going to focus on the mountain. It does focus okay through the 6-stop, but if you're struggling through a strong ND, you just focus it and then put the ND in. This is one of the downsides in using an ND, because you've got to take the ND off, focus, put it back on, take the ND off, refocus, and then put the ND back on, and again take it off and refocus and put the ND on once again. You do need your camera on a tripod for this technique to work effectively. This is so all of the photographs are almost identical, apart from where you focus in the shot. If it's not on a tripod, you'll have a different framing every time, and you might move one way or the other, and then it'll be really hard for the computer to blend them together successfully. So get your camera on the tripod, try not to trip over it, try not to knock it at all, and if you do, just start the sequence again. Now, if my camera is really close, like it is now, I might take a few more and focusing in different positions. And this will just give me the options when I'm editing in post. I might discard some of those, but it's better to get too many shots than not enough. So in this case, I've got this rock, which is probably about 60 centimeters away from my camera, and the mountain over there, which is probably 1,000 meters away. So there's a vast difference between those 2 points. So I'm going to focus stack in a few different places just to make sure I get this. So I'll focus on the mountain again. I'm going to take the shot there. Then I'm going to focus on the boathouse. And then I'm going to focus on this wall that's just protruding into the shot on the left-hand side. Then I'm going to focus on the rock in the foreground. And I'm doing this at 4 seconds, f11, ISO 50. And I've got that 6-stop filter on the front as well as a polarizer. This is one thing as well. You do need to be in manual mode because otherwise those settings will change. Now you can either focus using your flexible spot and moving it into the area, or if you do have a modern camera with a touchscreen, just touch on those areas, focus on them, and take the shot. Some cameras also have the function where you touch, focus, and take the shot all in one. So you can tap on it and it'll take the shot, tap on it and then it'll take the shot. I tend to just use the touchscreen. Now I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you get home and you don't have all the bits necessary to get everything in focus like you want, you'll be kicking yourself. So go through the process slowly, focus on the background, focus on the midground, focus on the foreground, and then check those shots. Now, if you flick back through the photos before you leave the location, you'll be able to see whether they match up or not. You might get a slight change with focus breathing, but that doesn't matter too much. Photoshop, Lightroom, and most editing programs can deal with it successfully. Now, if you've kicked your tripod, that's another thing completely. If that has happened and you see a big shift in the frame between the points where you focused, just start the sequence again. I do use Lightroom for most of my photo editing, but then specific tasks like focus stacking, I'll send across to Photoshop, process them, and then bring them back into Lightroom. And that's the great thing with the Adobe package. Those two programs work so well together. But if you've never used Photoshop before, it can seem really intimidating. But don't worry, I'm going to take you through it step by step. Now, there are two ways to do it. You can do it in an automated way and you can do it a manual way. I'm going to show you both ways today. I find that auto process sometimes fails around the edges of the images. It is worth learning both ways. And if you bookmark this video, you can come back to it and go over it as many times as you want. And that's the great thing with these videos on YouTube. They are completely free to you. Now, if you think I'm going a little bit too fast, you can click on the settings wheel in the bottom right-hand corner and change the speed to half or even slower if you want to. However, when you do listen to videos at that speed, whoever's talking does sound a little bit slurry and a little bit drunk, but it is quite funny as well. So in Lightroom, I'll select all of the images that I want to stack together. So I think it's this one, and this one. So let's select that one, let's select that one. So those three. Next, I'll right click on them, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. So what this does is instead of opening them as individual images, it puts them all in a layer stack. So that option in Lightroom saves you the steps of importing all of them into one image. So you can see I've got them here. So that is where I've focused on the mountain in the background. So I'm going to call this one back. This is where I'm focused on the boathouse. So then I go middle, and then on this one, front. And I'll just check that by turning the eyes off. So this is the front one, and I'll zoom in. Yeah, those rocks are nice and sharp in that foreground. You can see it's just starting to get blurry in the background. That background's really blurry. The next thing you need to do is auto align all three of those images. So I'll select the top one, hold down Shift, and then select the bottom one so they're all selected. And then I'll click Edit, Auto Align, and I'll just keep it on auto and then click OK. If there's any movement in the shot, or if there's any focus breathing, which you do get with certain lenses, this will get rid of that. And now if you look at it, look at where the boathouse is and where the rocks are, everything lines up nicely. Like I've already said, as long as you don't kick the tripod or move the camera too much, this works really well. Those slight movements or that movement in the focus breathing, this gets rid of that completely. So the next thing that I do is I go Edit, auto blend, and then I make sure stack images is selected and then click OK. This may take a while depending on what processor you have in your computer. I've got a Mac Mini M1 with 8 gigs of RAM, so it's a base model, and it processes them quite quickly. So now if I look at the image and I look at the layers that it's put in, it's got quite technical layers. So it's selected that for the back one. So then it's selected, what's it selected for the middle one? It's filled in all the gaps on the mountains for the middle one. And then with the front one, it's still selected part of the sky. Now, if you're unsure about how masks work, basically they're a layer that tells the computer what to show from that image and what to hide from that image. And basically anything in the mask that's black, it hides, and anything that's white, it shows. And any gradations in between, it'll change the opacity of it. So let's say you have a gray part to your mask, that'll almost make it just slightly see-through. It's a really powerful tool and it's well worth learning about layers. I'm not going to go into it in this tutorial because you don't really need to, but that's all you need to know really about layers. The lighter the mask, the more it'll show of that layer. So if I hide the top 2 layers by clicking on the eye icons, you can see the bottom image where I focused on the rocks, what's being shown from that image. So if I hold down Option and click on the mask, you can see all of those white bits relate to all of the bits that are being shown in that mask. So then if we put the second one on, take the bottom one off, not much in that one is being shown. So you can see that there. It relates to those white bits again. And the same with the top one. It relates to those white bits. If we look at those layers, especially the front focused one, so where I focused on the rocks, you can see all the way up this left-hand edge, it's showing detail from that image. And I'm guessing that some of that will be a little bit blurry. So if we go back to the normal image and then zoom in, let's go 100%, move that across. This bit of the image here is blurry. Now if we add back in the other parts, you can see there's a strip down the side where it is blurry. So I'm going to save that and go back across to Lightroom. So now we've got that auto stacked image. If we look down that edge, you can see there's that blurry bit down the edge. Now this is one of the reasons why I prefer to do focus stacking manually. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So I do have a confession to make. The photos I took really close to the rock in the foreground, I didn't get all of the shots that I needed. And this is what I was talking about. You need to make sure you've got all the photos and you need to check them. I focused on the mountain in the background. I focused on the boathouse. That's also good. And I focused on this wall. That's really good as well. And then I focused on this rock in the foreground. But what I didn't focus on was the second and the third rock. I think where I focused on the wall, this rock in the middle is okay. But the second rock along, this one, I don't have a clear and sharp one of that. You need to make sure you've got every single part in focus, because if you don't, it's really frustrating. And I'm really frustrated with this right now. Although in saying that, in making mistakes like this, it does get you learning. You will get frustrated enough to think, right, I need to get everything that I need. And this is actually really annoying because the water had flattened right off, the wind dropped right down, so I got a really nice reflection. And then I went and ruined it by not getting every single piece that I needed for the focus stack. So instead of editing this one manually, I'm going to go to another one that I did in a previous video, linked in the corner as well if you haven't seen that video yet. So it took me a while, but I've found the ones that I need to edit. So like we did with the auto process, I'm going to select them all, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Again, depending on what processor you have in your computer, this might take a while for it to open those images as layers, but if you've got a really fast computer, it shouldn't take too long at all. Once you have them in Photoshop, zoom in to see which one is which. This top one is blurry in the background, and this wooden bit in the foreground, that's nice, crisp and clear. So I'm going to label this one front, and then I'm going to hide it by clicking on the eye. The middle one, I'm going to label as middle. That's the bridge and the river. And then if I look up at the stream in the distance, the lowest layer is nice and in focus with this one. So I'm going to label that one back. Again, like we did with the auto process, I'm going to go edit, auto align, keep it on auto and click OK. In doing it this manual way, you are going to use the layers like it did in the auto process, but you're going to paint them in. Again, really straightforward, no need to worry about the process. And the great thing with layers and masks is that you're not deleting any of the image or any of the images in each of the layers. You can paint over them on the mask in black to get rid of that bit. And if you've gone too far, you just paint it back over in white and that'll bring it back. And this is a fantastic thing with Photoshop and with layering and with masking. You're hiding bits, but you're not deleting them. So first of all, with this front layer, I'm going to add a mask to it. I'm going to click on this square with a circle in it, and that's Add Layer Mask. Now, if you click on it, the whole mask goes white. So it's basically going to show that whole mask. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to Command Z to go back. I'm going to hold down Option. I think on a PC it's Alt when you click on this, but on a Mac, if you hold down Option and click on it, it will make the mask black and it'll hide that whole layer until you paint white bits on the mask. Then what I'm going to do is paint in the bits that I want to show. I've just got to make sure the mask is selected so you can see those white corners around each of them. If it's selected the image, you'll paint on the image. I don't want to do that. I want to paint on the mask. So I've got the mask selected. Then I'm going to select my paintbrush. And while we're at it, I've got the normal layout for Photoshop, but I prefer taking this panel and dropping it in here. It just keeps everything to the right-hand side, and it means that I'm not switching backwards and forwards from one side to the other. That's just another little tip when you are in Photoshop. So I'm going to select the brush. I've selected the mask. Now you've got these black and white palettes here. If you click on X, it'll switch between the two. This is just a quick way of switching between adding and subtracting from that mask. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. You can see I've got the brush quite big, 1200 pixels. I've got the hardness at about 10%. If you have really hard edges, it's not really nice. So yeah, I keep that around about 10%. I've got white selected and I'm going to paint in this foreground. So you can see it's a little bit blurry. If we zoom in, I'm going to paint over it and it's just getting a little bit sharper than what it was in that other image. You don't have to be too precise with this, especially when you've got something like a river, you've got the water blurred, and you've got an area where you can blend the layers together. The harder images to focus stack manually are the ones that have sharp edges from something that's right in the foreground, butted up to something that's really far away in your image. Then you just have to be really precise with your mask. So if I zoom out and I just select the mask, you can see it's just that bottom bit that's showing on this top image. So if we hide these two, that's what's showing in the top image. Then if we put the middle image in, you can see it blends in and you can't see that join. The next thing I'm going to do is add a mask to that middle layer. So I'll hold down Option or Alt, Add Layer Mask. So it's a black mask once again, hiding that whole layer. Next, I'm going to paint in all of this area here. This will just make this bridge a little bit sharper and all of this area here. Because that layer is underneath the front layer, I can go down as far as I want because it's not going to change that. So if you look at those two and I click on that middle layer, probably paint that bit in and paint that bit in. This top bit is hidden. So that shows the back layer through this area. And then if we go to the front layer, we've got this showing and everything else that's black hidden. So if we go back to the image, you can see all of the red is hidden and this front bit is being shown. In the middle layer, all of that bottom bit is being shown and that red area is hidden. And then the back one, You don't really have to add a mask to that one. And that's why I leave the lowest one in the stack till last. Don't have to change anything in that. Now, if we save that and go back to Lightroom, that old wooden branch, that's in focus. The bridge is in focus and the river is in focus in the background. So the whole thing is nicely in focus just by stacking it manually in that way. Now, getting all of your shot from front to back in focus is great, but if the dynamic range of your camera can't cope with the dynamic range of the shot, then it's never going to be a good photograph. So to increase the dynamic range, click on this video next. I'll show you a technique that'll really boost your photography to the next level.